Welcome back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self-acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. His name is RJ. He has a huge passion for sharing with others that God is still in the miracle business while delivering hope and support to the church behind bars. RJ is the author of the awe-inspiring and captivating book, God Doesn't Waste a Thing, which highlights the many miracles that he encountered while serving 7 years of a 20-year prison sentence. Having witnessed the transformative power of God in both his life and the lives of those around him, RJ has founded his exceptional Not My Will Ministries. It's a 501c3 profit organization. RJ strives to accomplish two crucial goals while speaking and supporting the community both in and out of prison. First is to educate the community that God is still in the miracle business while opening their eyes and hearts to the reality that there is a group of men in prison who need to know that they are loved and not forgotten. RJ fearlessly challenges those in society to step out of their comfort zone and into the prison ministry arena. Secondly, RJ unwaveringly dedicates lives in the supporting and empowering the men behind the prison walls to discover that their purpose, value, and identity is not defined by their circumstances, but rather through their relationship with Jesus Christ. RJ's made an intentional decision to live his life with transparency and vulnerability and is inviting you to join him in doing the same. RJ shares that this is only possible through accepting Jesus into your heart and making him your Lord and Savior. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to RJ. RJ, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the very kind introduction, and thanks for the invitation onto your show here.
Likewise, and I just want to say I'm really excited to talk to you today because during our pre-interview, you shared with me a bit of your story, and I'm gonna let you share that with the audience. But I found it very inspiring and very powerful. And to your point that God is still in the miracle business, you shared some insights into your time while you were serving prison that I couldn't sit there and say for certain how those things happened, but it definitely was a miracle in my opinion, and it really changed the lives of a guy that I hope you bring up in the show today.
Right on. Yeah, there's definitely times throughout my journey where I didn't know who or what was working things out for good until some deep reflection, lots of prayer. So you're in good company, bro. But it definitely, when you take a big step back and you realize that there's no real coincidences anymore, I was able to point back to almost every one of them and say, yeah, that was clearly God, and that one was too. And I hope that kind of resonates and lands with a lot of the people that listen to this, as grief usually brings a lot of hopelessness and despair. And that is a great place for people to kind of lean in and look for God to show up in a mighty powerful way.
Well, I'm personally excited to talk to you because I have not gotten the chance to talk to many people who've been incarcerated and even have walked that phase of life. And I know that there are many people, by the way, that are behind bars that ended up in a bad situation for whatever reason. Sometimes there were things that led to that that may or may not have been out of their control. And what I'm excited to talk to you about is breaking down some of these societal stereotypes and stigmas around that because I don't see people as, criminals and this and that. I see people as there's a bad situation that came up, and that may or may not have been their fault or their cause. It really is situational on that front. But I do believe that everybody makes mistakes in life. I'm a big believer of that. We all make mistakes, and sometimes we pay consequences greater than some and greater than others. And after talking to you in the pre-interview, I've seen how you took your situation and made something very beautiful of it, and let alone, more importantly, found your relationship with God through this. And you were actually able to help many more people through your situation. So I wanted to open the show with you sharing a little bit about your story and your background and what led you on this course.
Yeah, happy to have the platform. And I appreciate you saying that there's men inside of prison and women inside of prison, and even that didn't get incarcerated, where their situation may or may not have been a circumstance that was brought upon themselves. So that is a caveat that should be stated. For me personally, I brought mine on myself. I'll begin with, again, taking full responsibility there. In 2012, I was a high school teacher in a suburb here in Colorado, and I made the choice to sexually assault one of my high school students. And from that interaction, it ended up lending me a 20-year prison sentence, which you shared in the intro, 7 of which I served. But prior to actually ever stepping into a jail cell or getting locked up inside of a prison, to mention the word that's in your header up there, grief, panic, despair, desperation set in immediately when I knew that my choices were going to put me inside of a situation that I had no experience in, no hope of getting through. Absolute terror set into my life, panic. And it first led me to where I thought my best course of action was to go and try to kill myself by laying on some train tracks. And so I want to begin by stating, if there's anyone listening to this and there's a moment, there's an event, there's a situation that has led you to feel despair, hopelessness, grief, panic. I mean, I can go on and on for words that I can relate to so deeply. Suicide, taking your own life, isolation is not the way out of that. Seek help, reach out to you, Chris, reach out to a coach to first off just begin communicating, because that is where a lot of my issues lied. Is I didn't know where my struggles were. I didn't know what my identity was. I had no relationship with any power higher than self-serving entitlement. And that in and of itself causes mass chaos in my life. So with that being laid out as kind of the facts, clearly I didn't pass away on the train tracks, thank God. That was the first miracle of my life, that I didn't even know God at the time, but that's the beauty of what he will and does and continues to do, is he'll work miracles out even when you're not a believer of his or a follower of his son's, Jesus Christ. So there's far too many ups and downs and ins and outs of my story to share here in that 5 to 10 minute intro. But going through the prison system, it's created to literally separate you from your past and create in you this brand new environment, this brand new persona. That's why they kind of get rid of your name. They get rid of your clothes, they get rid of your car, your house, your food, anything that used to be like attached as your identity. Like, I'm this guy with this clothes and this family and this house and this title. All of that went away November of 2013, and I became a DOC number, a Department of Corrections number, wearing the exact same clothes as everybody else in there, from 18 to 80, black, white, gangbanger, white collar criminal. And so that was really difficult for me to understand. I'm no different anymore. There's nothing that I've done in my past that is of any value really going forward. There's no prestige, there's no amount of education that gets you a higher class, higher status. And so going through and witnessing murder attempts on my life and bullying and being ostracized and left out of conversations that I used to be the life of the party, now I'm hated, despised, and often like chased out of groups, really had this deep impact of who am I and what is my value? What is my purpose anymore in my life? That was in 2013. I wasn't supposed to get out until 2033. So it's amazing. I've been out for 5 years already. God has so blessed me with this opportunity, but I had no clue what I was supposed to be doing for the next 240 months. And so watching God's hand over me moving me through these prisons, keeping me away from real harm, really began to put in place like, oh, there's a power that's higher than my selfishness. And there is one who is above all, who can do amazing, exceedingly, and abundantly more than I could ever imagine. And that's what I'm so excited to always go back into prisons or to step into churches and preach and speak about, because whether you're in prison or not, there's probably 85% of your listeners sitting there going, if I could change this one thing about my situation, I would be so much better. And then that thing gets changed and they're like, well, now there's this. It's recognizing that in your current situation, God is working all that out, but that there's also joy, purpose, laughter, love, even in the midst of those chaotic, painful, grieving moments. That's why the title of my book resonates with almost every single person who reads it or listens to it. God doesn't waste a thing. I didn't ask for all of this. I brought it on myself, but God didn't waste any of those scary moments. So for your listeners, you probably didn't ask for the pain you're going through, but God's not going to waste it. And that's what I'm happy to answer any questions about today.
I think that's such a powerful perspective that God doesn't waste a thing because we've all gone through moments in our life. And again, I always preface some worse than others because I can never, speak directly to those things. But everything that we do has a purpose and a meaning and oftentimes a consequence for our actions. And I think that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes as we're always learning and navigating as we go forward through life. And we're always going to be presented with new challenges or new things that come up. And it's really figuring out that choice we have of what's right, what's wrong, what's good for us, what's bad for us. And sometimes we have to trial and error our way through that to really discover what is actually right there.
Yeah, for sure. And there's, as we talked about in the pre-interview, there's several stories, and I'm happy to jump into any of them if that's where you want this to go. Where in the moment, I thought there was no way, shape, or form that something good was going to come from this particular situation. And it wasn't like it was Monday, the bad thing happened, Tuesday, it was amazing. There was some of those situations where it was 6, 7 years, but faithful walking, faithful prayer, being being joyful in the moment, looking back, going, "Oh yeah, I wouldn't be here right now enjoying this opportunity without having gone through that past terrible time." And so I'm happy to share some of those. I'm happy to dive into some that I don't often share, but it's just the encouragement of people who are going through a divorce, people who are going through a cancer diagnosis, people who are going through a loss of job, or I guess for the most extreme situation, the death of a loved one. Yeah, all of those things are terrible. I'm not going to
So
sit here and say, yeah, they're great. Thank God for them. That's not the point. It's recognize that, absorb that, but instead of looking in and panicking and going isolated, look up, pray into it, and ask God to reveal a blessing and walk you through those moments and see what may come out in the near future.
well, I think where I want to start the podcast is really, that moment where you got incarcerated. You brought up a very powerful thing that I like to talk about in grief, which is you lose your identity in a lot of ways. And I always say that it doesn't matter if you lost a child like I did, or you lost a parent, you lost a spouse, you lost a best friend, you lost a job, you got incarcerated. Grief is in all different aspects of life. And what's crazy about grief, though, is exactly what you said a few minutes ago, that there's this identity or part of our identity that all of a sudden is gone. It's just taken away from us. And that leaves us in this place of kind of hanging in the balance of uncertainty and unknown. And I don't know what to expect next. Or, like you said about when you got incarcerated, this really became, I no longer have my house. I don't have my car. I don't have my job. I'm not my title anymore. I'm now labeled and defined as X. And who am I now? And like you said too, about which I thought was very powerful, the Department of Corrections and the prison system in this country really nullifies any identity or personality down to a DOC number. And now you're
Yeah.
just a number. And nobody really, that place of, RJ or Chris doesn't even exist now. Now it's number 2578641. Like, that it just takes away all of that identity that you were used to having and you had in your life as a routine. Walk me through a little bit of that process when that happened and how you navigated that identity shift.
As I was praying going into this about what the Lord wanted me to share, I've never shared this part before. And one of the most interesting and humbling pieces was after they moved me from jail and I'd gotten sentenced to prison, because jail, not to get into the judicial system, is for like under a year or a misdemeanor. When I got sentenced to 20 years, the county jail basically hands you off to the state, like, here you go, you take him for the next couple decades. So when I moved from jail into the prison system, day one, within 3 hours of being into that system, I get put into a room in an orange jumpsuit, just like they had on TV, with 18 to 20 other guys. And we have all the same exact garbagey pair of white boxers, this shared ugly jumpsuit, some socks, but no boots. And this officer came in and counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 19 men. And he goes, I'll be right back. And he goes and he grabs 19 pairs of boots. No conversation about, hey, what size are you? What size are you? What do you need? What He came back with 19 random boots, chucked them into the cell, and then said, there you go, guys, figure it out. And I'm sitting there with my old persona of I used to buy really nice stuff and I'd try it on and I will get something that will take care and satisfy me and my needs and my comfort first. And all these other guys who've kind of been through the system are grabbing their stuff and going through this one fits, this one doesn't, chucking this one, trying to trade. And I'm sitting there and one of these guys goes, hey, bro, you better grab some. Like, there's not another round of these. And it hit me like, oh gosh, I'm not special. No one's going to come in and be like, did you get what you needed? Would you like to come try on some? And like 3 hours, 180 minutes into this, Chris, I'm thinking, I don't think I'm going to have boots that fit. And guess what? Sure did not fit at all. And I was in them for a couple weeks until I got to another place. There's no like, I'd like to talk to your manager, sir. It was super humbling and absolutely a qualifier of like, you used to be here, this is what you're at now. And that's because of your choices. The states deemed you so unsafe or not fit for society that we're going to take all of your decision making away down to here's some boots, bro. And there's those kinds of humbling experiences from getting boots to the first time we went to shower. And I'm not going to get into graphic stories there, but you're showering with 100 other dudes that aren't really in the habit of trying to make clean and wise and healthy choices. So there's some people who are like bringing out like wrappers from food and standing on those so that they don't have to stand on this shared dirty prison floor because we haven't been able to buy shower shoes yet. And I would have never thought in my entire life, oh, I'm subject to getting issues and problems on my feet showering. So it's down to that most minute detail that no normal person is thinking about is now what my 100% focus is. Showering, things that fit, what will I actually be able to eat? What can I do? When will I be able to find a phone? Like all of those things really put you back into this place of like everything I was, a phone full of friends, phone full of business contacts, basically brought right down to you may not talk to someone you know for 2 to 3 weeks, period, until we figure out how to get you into your state phone system. And that was the most sad and basically depressing thing for me was like, we'll just make up the day. Tuesday, I was out in society, could text anybody, go to the gym, go to a movie, have a dinner, call my brother, call my dad, hang out with friends. Fast forward a couple weeks, I don't know a person that's around me, and most of them don't want to talk to me. And the majority of my old friends, and I can't fault them for it, don't want to be my friend anymore. So there's that loss. Like no one died, but the relationships were severed. And there's some I still haven't spoken to, and that's been now, so look at the clock and the date down here, 13 plus years. They're just like, nope, you made that choice. I don't want to be a part of your life anymore. And that's a consequence I have to continue to live with.
Now, when you were in prison those first couple years, do people ever talk about, what crime they committed or grief they have over losing relationships and connections like you just brought up? What's that environment like? Do people even talk about grief in that environment?
Two parts to that question. Yes, what people did in their crime is one of the most talked about things inside of prison, especially early into your sentence. Whether someone's being honest or not, you don't know because you're not able to be like, hold on, Chris, let me check and pull up Google and type in who you are. And so there's always a level of like manipulation or lying. And that was part of what led me to so much of my struggles at first was there is a hierarchy to crimes inside of a prison. Murderers seem to be glorified and looked at like, hey, heck yeah, man, you took someone's life. No one's going to mess with you. You're the top of the food chain, down to someone with a sex offense, whether it was a really young child or someone nearing the age of consent. They don't care. There's not like a sliding scale. They're the bottom of the food chain. And so when people would ask about my crime, at first I was so afraid I didn't want to talk about it, which not talking about it is kind of loudly telling them what you did. But when I got a little bit more mature and more understanding of the system, and especially after I found some mentors and found the Lord, I began to just kind of trust that God is going to protect me. And then I would share my crime, my past, who I was is now not defining who I am. But so that piece I want to answer is always talked about because someone wants to kind of size you up and base your past on if they want to be your friend now. So that's a really weird part that we could talk about for probably 4 or 5 of your podcasts. The second piece, discussing grief, not as much as you would think. There's a lot of whining, complaining, back in the days stories like back in the day I used to have 5 boats and this and that. And again, whether they're saying it to make themselves feel cool or to try to level themselves up, like, hey, we're both in this prison, but I used to be better or cooler than you. I never got much into that because it was painful enough knowing what I had lost that I didn't want to constantly revisit it until I got to two of my mentors and best friends, a guy named Chaplain Matt and a guy named Chaplain Troy, where I began to unpack why are you always talking about the things you've lost? Why don't you talk about the opportunity that you have and what there is to gain? And that's where I realized like where I was putting my heart and my focus and my desire is what I was craving for. That's your idol. And it used to be money, power, prestige, names, titles, cars. Shift that to who are you in Christ? What does he say about you? How can you be a servant to others and love others instead of worshiping the things you used to have? So what you do on a daily basis is massively needed inside. And most guys don't get to the heart of the grief. They kind of float around the periphery of whining about the things they've lost, which I can't blame them. It's pretty extreme, but it takes a certain ministry like what I do now, mentor like you are to so many, or really like a godsend to show up and say, I hear you. That's got to hurt. I'm not minimizing that or even telling you to stop it, but how do we look into that pain and find the source of joy in the midst of it and coming out of it.
I think that's really powerful what you just brought up because the same thing does happen to people who are not incarcerated, by the way. They have a very hard time talking about grief. And I see it all the time where people are very focused on what they lost. And I was there too when I lost my kid. I was very focused on, I just lost this, I just lost my future, I just lost this opportunity. And it's very hard to get out of that place sometimes on your own. I think how you said when we started this podcast about how isolation is never a good thing, and I definitely don't think it is. But I love how powerful it was that you said you found mentors inside that were able to say, instead of focusing on your lack, here's an opportunity here, or what exists over here that's going to be something you can have down the
Yep.
road. And I think we all need somebody that's going to be in our corner, like a mentor or a coach that can help us make that shift in our mindset. I wanted to ask you, as you were in prison, did you have anybody on the outside that was there in any way to support you via phone calls or, being able to send you money for commissary, anything like that?
Yeah, my parents were and still are two of the greatest humans that have walked on this earth. They've always been loving, always been kind, always been supportive, never like placated me and said, "Oh, what you did wasn't a big deal." They were very honest, like, that was absolutely terrible. We wish you wouldn't have done it. It has caused problems in our family. And although we wish you wouldn't have walked down that road, we are here to love you and support you through it. So they were mighty impactful and still are. My dad is my hero. Like, on the ranking of people that have transformed my life, Jesus will be one forever. My dad will always be two. And then the two guys I mentioned, Matt and Troy, those are three and four. Those are almost like non-negotiables. There's space for other persons to step into five, six, seven. Not that I wander around just ranking my friends, but those four have forever changed my life. But to to piggyback on your question, there's another gentleman who I'm not often pointing to, which should get more credit and more praise because he is like a giant in my life, not only because he's 6'6", but his name's Brett. And he actually I just got married 6 months ago. What a blessing, an amazing God fearing and anointed and blessed and smart and beautiful wife. And my friend Brett, who I've known since I was in middle school, never left me through my entire prison sentence. A lot of the friends that left me and that I lost, he also lost because he chose to stay and support me. He didn't ever say what I did was right because it wasn't. He was the first one actually to be like, "That's wrong, man. I'm never going to condone what you did, but I'm also not going to judge what you did because of who our Lord and Savior calls me to be." Even before I knew God, he was walking out what it's like to be a good Christian, a Christ follower. And I write about him in my book as, if I'm half as good of a loving friend and a Christ follower as Brett, I will have exceeded my expectations. But he just came back. He lives in a different state and spoke at my wedding. And one of the things, and it gives me chills to share, for 5 of the 7 years inside of prison, Chris, I remember on the phone saying, "Brett, do you think there's anybody who will ever like me again? Like, as a friend? Do you think someone will ever hire me? Do you think there's any possibility that there's even the slightest chance of a girl wanting to go on a date with me? Like, clearly they won't marry me because of my choices and having to register as a sex offender. So marriage is off the table." I would ask him those questions like almost monthly. And he brought that back up because it clearly impacted him of what God can do and will do. During the wedding speech, he's like, not only did God exceed all of those questions, will someone like you? You're filled with a room full of friends now. Will someone respect you? I have amazing people who partner with the ministry I started. And clearly someone fell in love and got to marry me. So he was that sounding board who, I know I was a pain on some of those calls, Chris. Like, I just can't imagine picking up going, for these 20 minutes, because prison calls are only 20 minutes. this dude may just complain for 19 of them. And he kept picking up. So on this platform and more often, Brett was that guy and still is.
I think that's incredibly powerful to have a friend like that because people like that, in my own personal life experience, are very few and far between to find people like that. Because, society, like I brought up when we started the podcast, there's so much stigma and stereotype that comes out around every circumstance of life. And people do live, and we live in this society nowadays where people are very judgmental. They're very label something, attach a meaning to it. Oh, this person's this. In my job, when I worked in mortgages, I worked with people all over the board. I worked with people that did go to jail and went to jail for various things of, another nature. I could talk about that for hours. But what I learned, by the way, is that I've seen people go through these experiences like you have, and I don't think it defines you. I don't think it's something to say like, oh, because you did this one terrible bad thing, you are now this. I don't see that. What I see though is somebody that had a hard knock in life, a really bad one, whether that was your own choice or it came across your path for whatever reason. But I've watched people rebuild themselves in such a powerful way. And I think having a friend like Brett that you had is really part of that journey. And there's going to be people like that. That's why I said they're few and far between, but there's going to be people that hold space for you. And I love what you said about that, that you might have called and complained for 19 minutes, but he was there in the last minute to give you some comfort, some advice, some solace, and some affirmation that he's there for you no matter what. And I love that he wasn't going to condone what you did, but he said, I'm going to be here for you through this. And I just want to commend him for being that person because I think that if we had more people like that in this world, we wouldn't be so judgment filled and we would actually be helping people instead of hurting them on top of the hurt that's already gone on.
Absolutely. And his parents were amazing parents. They were great friends of our family. My mom and his mom, gosh, I think they went to high school together and were good buddies way back in the day. And a lot of credit goes to them as well as how they raised Brett. And the piece that you just kind of pointed the flashlight right on is unless you've understood forgiveness and redemption and transformation, it's really hard to give it to someone else. And those are words that God created. Like those aren't normal. Forgiving someone for hurting you or hurting someone that was close to you or doing something in a circle of friends that may cause that circle to look bad, like, oh my gosh, if that guy's in your friend group and he chose to do that, that must mean all of you are in some regard tainted by that choice. Like forgiveness is such a powerful gift for both people. And the same thing for redemption. I was so far away from being a redemption story at the time. I was still right in the middle of my hot mess, complaining, egocentric, entitlement mode. But to know what God will do is, I believe, what he always saw. I can't speak for him. He'd probably be an amazing guest actually on your show now that I think about it. But to know enough of what God has continued to do in people's lives to say, I'm called to love this brother right now. That is the best gift we can give anybody. That's hopefully what you champion daily in your work is you probably can't fix 99% of the problems that you're hearing about. It's really hard to fix someone's grief. It's just most of them are it's not possible. But you can be a mighty impactful conduit of love and hope and even a hug. And that's one of the tools that I teach when I go into prisons and even men's groups in society after I speak and preach at the churches is there was a tool that I made up called Soul, which the genesis of it is my chaplain Matt used to always tell me that the soul is the one thing that's always connected to God. Even before you're a believer, God has instilled in you a soul. When you accept the Holy Spirit, he clearly resonates and lives and breathes through the Holy Spirit, which is the soul. And then when you die and your body decays, your soul lives on forever. So soul always resonated with me like that's probably something important to keep in the forefront. So I came up with when events or circumstances or encounters happen, to always think of the soul, which the S stands for stop and separate. If someone brings up a painful moment, like my my grandmother just passed away and I'm stuck in prison here for the next 30 years, I can't be with my family and I won't be able to go to the funeral. Stop and separate. Okay, this is clearly hurting this man. He's sad. Don't say anything right away. Observe everything that's going on. That's the O. He is hurting. He is in here. That's a fact. His family may judge him for this and say, hey, bro, really wish you were here to help out mom and pops through this. Understand all of the circumstances. He might lose friends. He might be absolutely mortified because his grandma was his number one champion. And so the L is, what is the loving response that honors God and honors the person you're in contact with? And a lot of that time is, can I just sit with you, or can I go for a walk with you on the prison yard? Should I pray? What do you need from me? I'm not going to tell you to stop crying because that's not kind. But if we're still crying in 6 or 7 or 8 months about the same thing, the love and response shifts to how can we move into a different part of life that helps us all grow. So I use soul a lot, and it works for you, for me, my wife. It's impactful in every situation if we can just take the time to use it.
I, I really love that analogy that you brought up, and you touched on a lot of big topics there that I wanted to circle on too. That, what you brought up about, my show can bring comfort to people. Something I learned on my journey in grief coaching, and even through my losses I went through, is that grievers don't want to be fixed. That's the really funny part about them, is we don't want to be fixed. And on top of that, we can't necessarily fix these things. When like your situation, for example, we can't fix what happened. What happened happened for whatever regardless circumstance it happened. Now we can't go back in time and change it, and we can't fix it. But we have to come to that place of acceptance of what happened and for what it is. And I think that the other topic you brought up about forgiveness, that's a loaded topic. And I have a guy that came on my podcast, did 2 episodes with me, and I had a very hard time with forgiveness in my own personal life. I had a hard time when somebody would say, well, just forgive somebody. And I'd say, why? It keeps happening again. Why am I going to just use forgiveness as a scapegoat? And I struggled with it a lot. And something that I've caught on to you since we talked, which I think is so powerful. You talk about taking ownership and responsibility a lot. That's something I admire about you because I wish more people had that view. I've changed my perspective on forgiveness a lot to, you've got to start forgiving yourself first before you start going out in the world and forgiving everybody and everything for whatever it was that happened. You got to look at yourself. And that's a really hard thing to do, is turn that thing around right here and look at yourself and say, I forgive myself for making a bad choice. I forgive myself for that. Or I forgive myself for tolerating and allowing certain things in my life, or forgiving myself for participating in things that I knew had a consequence and I knew it and I made a bad choice. And giving yourself that place to forgive yourself first, because that's where you can really ground yourself. It's not to condone what you did or said, but it's to acknowledge it and just see it and be the observer of it. And when it does come down to forgiving other people, it's letting go of that remorse or that anger or that frustration or that unsettled feeling. And I think when you can get to that place, forgiveness can be a very powerful tool. So I just want to say thank you for bringing that up today.
I appreciate it. I honor your ability to kind of tune into it and to be willing to follow up with that statement. It's not easy. It's much easier to just continue living in the shame and the unforgiveness, but there's not much joy there, man. It's like throwing the world's most depressing party and you're the only one in attendance constantly. You think it's going to be fine, and then in the middle of it you're like, this is trash, this is not fun, again and again. And I wish I could tell you, I'm like, yeah, it took about 3 days and then the light bulb flicked and I just went right on and had unforgiveness removed. Not even close. Several of the guys in my life would tell you I was one of the most difficult and easily the most entitled person to kind of come to this transformation. It's actually where Chaplain Matt will often comment. He's like, that's one of the reasons I know the Holy Spirit works and lives is you went from this despaired, entitled, all about me person to someone whose focus is now not only just on God, but on serving others. And you've kind of put yourself third. I made up the phrase me three, God first, the person in front of me second, me three, which is counterculture to my entire upbringing for myself. And so that's a big shift. And it's something I
Mhm.
strive for daily because the old me will pop in and be like, what can I get out of this? What is going to resonate to help me, not Chris and his listeners, but how will I benefit from this? Which doesn't really create amazing relationships. And it's not actually bringing that much joy to me when I try to live that way anymore.
I love that you said that because I used to be very selfish in my own forthright in my life in many ways, and it did nothing but create chaos when I look backwards. It did not create good relationships. I always was looking out for me, very egotistical, as you brought up, and I've made that shift away from it. And like you can attest to in your own story, I've learned that I don't do this podcast for me, sadly. I do it for other people. I do it for people that need stories like yours to help them navigate through things. And there's been so much reward and so much purpose when you reverse that order, like you talked about, like putting God first and putting you third. Like when you talk about reversing that order, you actually get more in life. You get more fulfillment, you get better relationships, you get better outcomes. Um, RJ, I wanted to ask you because I know we're coming up on the last 15 minutes or so of the podcast, and I wanted to get to this. I may have to bring you back for a second episode, my friend.
Welcome.
Um, what I wanted to ask you about is your faith journey in prison, because I know you talked a little bit in the pre-interview about what that journey was for you in prison. And I'd love for you to share that story. And if you could also share the story about the guy that never talked and how that miracle happened. That was a very powerful story you shared.
So, being a math teacher, I would have never thought would play such an integral part of my faith journey. But the thing about math is it doesn't change and you can always prove it. Like, there's not a whole lot of debate with people around what 4 times 6 is. Like, it's 24 and it always will be if you're doing it right. So, when I wandered down to the chapel, not knowing the Lord, not knowing why I was down there, I was moved in my what I now know as the spirit to go down there. I came across a chaplain who was happy to listen to me complain and almost be rude around what his God said and how his God was unfair. But once he kind of lovingly asked me to kind of jump into a few of the stories in the Bible, which would take too long here, and I started to realize there is this higher power. There's something else that is in control. For me, my faith journey was almost like a constant interview with him. I have over on my bookshelf here still notebooks full of the questions I go down there and say, okay, in my past, math always works out. So I'm going to ask you questions about this Bible and this God and this man named Jesus. You better be able to tell me why it works out. And if there's any gaps, we're going to zone in on those. And so that was my faith journey of like, show me, teach me, prove to me over and over and over again until it just finally clicked. Oh my gosh, this shakes out in every way you look at it. And I was starting to feel different. I was starting to love different. I was learning to pray for people I didn't even know. That is so abnormal. So, that being my faith journey led to this story you asked about. We would go down every Friday and sing to the men who were incarcerated that happened and unfortunately were acquiring dementia and some full on Alzheimer's. So this is like the status of the situations in prison. These men were waking up every day not knowing where they are, why they're there, sometimes even who they are. Like, that's a bad situation. I wasn't enjoying a lot of my years, and I knew who I was and exactly why I was there. But one of these gentlemen down there, Mr. Gray in the book, because I had to change some of the names to protect identities, used to be a brilliant lawyer. But for 3.5 years, Chris, all he did was rub his stomach and pat his head and never spoke. He didn't respond to a question. He never made any like facial reactions to how you engaged with him. And the nurse behind, when I went down there, like the fourth month in a row, every Friday, I was finally like, "Hey, Mr. Green, we're going to come over here and sing. You're welcome to come and join us. Just want to let you know I love you, brother." And she goes, "Why are you doing that? He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know who you are. And he's certainly not going to respond to you." I go, I guess I just love him, nurse. That's what I'm called to do right now. Because again, I was a Christian for maybe 6 months. So I'm still new to this. Like, I'm just supposed to love people. That's what I'm working with. I don't know many scriptures, but I know I can love people. So we were over here singing, as we always did, to the six or seven of them at the time. And as we get to one of the last songs, Amazing Grace, which we sang often, out of the corner of my eye, as me, another guy who's in prison, and then two of the chaplains are singing, Mr. Green has tears flowing down his eyes, and he's out loud singing every word to Amazing Grace, every one of them. And I am bawling. The chaplains are bawling. The other incarcerated friend of mine who's passed away since is playing the guitar, trying to keep it together. Like, what is happening here? This is crazy. And I, again, am so new to this, like, new faith. I'm like, what is really going on? This is unreal. And at the end of it, he stopped singing, goes back to patting his head, and never spoke again. But the nurse came over and is standing there staring at him, watching him do this. And at the end, she looks at me and the chaplains and goes, "What was that?" And I'm so sarcastic. Again, kindness wasn't my most top of the line thing that God was working on at the time. I go, "What do you think it was? Do you like think he changed his diaper differently, or did he get different medicine or different food? What do you think it was, huh?" And she goes, "Was that God?" And Chaplain Matt said, "Yes, but the question you should be asking yourself is, what are you going to do about it? You can't see that and just chalk it up to a good day for Mr. Green." And in that moment, she asked to be led in a prayer to give her life to the Lord. Because, Chris, you can't just look at it and go, "That was a good day." You see God in something like that when miracles show up right in your face, and you have to make a decision. You ignore it or you bow a knee to it. And that's where the title of the book came from, was God didn't waste 3.5 years of silence. For the first time that he used his voice, it forever changed her life, not to mention enhanced my prayer life of like, okay, that happened. And I can't wait to see what the next miracle is. And that's what the book is full of, is all of those reaffirmations of how God showed up in my situation. Ultimately, spoiler alert, getting me out 13 years early.
You know, RJ, I'm really appreciative you shared Mr. Green's story because I myself have had stories like that in my life. That's for another podcast, but there's ways in which God works through people. And I always say that you may run across a person just like you ran across with Mr. Green who doesn't talk and he only does this all day long. But then there's that moment that happens where you're singing Amazing Grace and this guy just opens up and there's no rhyme or reason or logical processing consciously. You can sit there and say, "Oh, well, he just decided to do this." Oh, well, you can't even rationalize it. And so I have found a lot that those moments in life, I feel like God is moving through that person. And that
Yep.
moment happened, by the way, because that moment made a huge impact on you. I can see it. He made a big, big impact on you. And that also changed the perspective of that nurse you talked to. It changed her perspective. It changed your chaplain's perspective. I mean, that's what I think is so powerful about the work of God. And you only see that when you're very present and your mind is quiet, is when you see that. And that's when the power of God comes through. And you have nothing but, I don't know if you felt this way in that moment, but I felt it when I've come across these things. It's almost like this very calming, very surreal presence comes over your body. And you really feel this otherworldly type of sensation where everything that you may have thought was a problem or challenges you were going through or things like that all just dissipate. They're gone. And what's left there, by the way, is just this beautiful moment.
Yeah, the struggle I think that a lot of people in society have is there's busyness, there's phones, there's really great doctors, there's unbelievable therapists and resources, and all of those things that you point to go, well, he just had a great doctor, or he had this vitamin, or there was that was one of the gifts of prison is like, nah, man, we are bare bones in it in here. We got a acoustic guitar. We're all in the same clothes. He's certainly not getting great medical attention. Not slamming prison in their medical. That's another podcast. But there was no one to get glory but God. And that's what I think so many people in society are so busy that they chalk it up as a coincidence or they don't even focus on it. They're just like, yeah, that happened by. And they're on to the next thing or they're back on their phones. That was something I'm actually really grateful for is my foundation was rooted deep in just being in the moment. One of my friends in prison used to say, just be where your feet are, man. Just right now. You don't got a phone going off in your pocket. You don't got another appointment. There's not another business deal. You're here until you lock down for count time, and then you're somewhere else. Be where your feet are. And for those years, it worked. It's still my daily prayer is just be where my feet are, focus on God and the person who's talking to me second.
That is beautifully said, RJ. And I think this is a great place for us to wrap up the podcast, but I'm gonna have to bring you back for another episode, my friends. I really hope you're open to
Yeah,
that.
yes, sir.
Um, RJ, I want to say thank you so much for being a guest on today's episode. This has been just, I love talking to people who are spiritual and have this walk of God and can share these moments in life of how walking through the Christianity that you found through going through jail has an impact on you and how that's changed you as a person. I can see that growth after talking to you today. I don't even know who you were before that. I don't even know, but I can just see the transformation from what you've shared with us today and how you've walked through a moment where you had a lot of everything going for you in life and literally lost everything, and including your identity all the way down to that. And you got stripped down to just you as a person and having to rebuild that through finding your faith and working through accountability and ownership and forgiveness and having supportive people like Chaplain Matt and Troy and even Brett in your pocket. You have such a beautiful story, my friend, and I just know that this next chapter of life going forward from here is going to be so much more impactful and so much more meaningful because the best way I can phrase this, you walked through the fire and you came out the other side a much better person, and you're out there serving people at a higher level and higher capacity than you ever could have done before. So I just want to say thank you so much for being the person that you are.
Appreciate that. I'll receive that wholly.
And so, RJ, as I wrap up the podcast, I usually ask my guests a couple questions. One of them is if you were to meet somebody going through grief or maybe who feels stuck in grief, like the guys you said that complain a lot in prison, what advice would you give them to help them navigate their journey just a little bit easier?
Be open to talking about it. Three words I've made as a goal of mine to live out every day is to be intentional, like mean what you're going to do, to be vulnerable, step into uncomfortable, and to be transparent, be honest. So be those three things and the good will come.
That's beautiful advice, my friend. I wish that was something that I could get more people to do in my own world, and I try to work on that as much as I can when I coach. Is be open, be honest about things, be transparent with yourself. It's when you can find people that make you feel safe, just like you talked about Brett today. Somebody had said, "I'm not going to condone what you did, but I'm going to hold space here and support you on this journey." Finding those people that allow you to be in those areas to be open, I think, is such great advice to help you move forward. Um, RJ, I also want to give you some space here to share with people if they want to connect with you after listening to today's podcast. And also, I do want to say, check out RJ's book, God Doesn't Waste a Thing. Where can they find your book as well?
On Amazon, it's by my pen name Luke Chance. That's Chaplain Troy's two sons' names, which is Luke and Chance. So it was a way to thank him and honor him. But God Doesn't Waste a Thing is on Amazon. It's also on my website, which is how you can connect with me, notmywillministries.com. There's also some of my talks if they want to go and listen. And once we get this, I'll upload this into the website as well. But yeah, I would welcome any conversations from churches who may want me to come out and speak and teach about what God has done in my life and encourage their congregation. Or if there's men's groups who want to go through the same workshop I lead in prison, that has been really transformative for men in and out of prison. And also really looking for some businesses or business owners who would maybe be interested in partnering up to support and sponsor all of the prisons that we go in to serve, because it takes a team to step into this arena, and those guys in there have no money, and so it takes a team of supporters outside to finance us going in and sharing with them the gospel. So any of those pique any of your listeners' interest, reach out and I'll honor any phone call.
Well, RJ, I just want to say thank you so much for being a guest again on today's episode. And for listeners, I want you guys to know, go to the show notes after you listen to this podcast. You'll find RJ's website there, a link to his Amazon book. I really recommend you guys check that out. I do recommend connecting with RJ. He's a phenomenal guy. Like I said, I have a big feeling he's coming back for a part two to this podcast because there's a lot we didn't get to talk about today. That he's got some powerful lessons to share. So stay tuned for our part two episode coming soon here in the near future. But RJ, thanks again, my friend.
Appreciate you, brother. Much love. God bless.
I want to thank all of our listeners for joining RJ and I on today's episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from RJ's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.